Let's do it. So welcome everybody to another episode of Leadership from the Heart. Today I have with us Phillip Holmes. Phillip is a coach and consultant and the owner of the Highest Good Consulting. He's a passionate advocate for creating healthy work environments and empowering professionals to leave toxic jobs. He has more than 65,000 followers on Instagram and a fast-growing coaching business. Phillip is dedicated to democratizing leadership development to help professionals quit toxic jobs and find or build healthy companies. Welcome, Phillip. How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm doing great. This is take two for everybody. We tried this before and it didn't work. So I'm a little bit more comfortable in this conversation just because, I know how cool Phillip is now. So.
Oh, thank you. Likewise, I was looking forward to talking to you again. So I love it. Yeah.
Awesome. So let's start by telling us more about your journey of working for the nonprofit to starting your own marketing agency, and then what inspired you to make that leap.
Yeah. So in 2017, I joined the organization. And at that point, there wasn't a whole lot of traction within their marketing communications department. And to be fully transparent, at the time, my competency levels as a marketer and also as a leader were maybe average at best when it comes to marketing, but fairly low when it comes to leadership. And I had some experience in leadership, but nothing that was significant or formal at that point. And so over the course of 5 years, I was able to build a team and build competencies in the area of marketing and somewhat get some more like full-time leadership experience under my belt. And as we were in that job, it became very clear that there were a lot of issues within the organizations. And at the time, I couldn't quite put my finger on like what the problem was. You just know that something ain't right.
Right.
And you know that the things that you're wanting are good. I knew generally what it meant to be a good team player, right? Because I played basketball all the way through college, so I was always part of team sports. So I understood that, and I knew that we were not, at the very least, working as a team.
Sure.
And I also knew that the organization wasn't really reaching its full potential because of the silos and the lack of collaboration that existed. And what essentially ended up happening is a third-party confidential consultant was hired around my 4th or 5th year. And at this point, I had gotten 3 promotions. I was a VP. I started off as a director. I was a VP. And I was also asked to be on a committee to work with this consultant to help bring about basically some strategic change. And what essentially happened was, as I spoke up and as I addressed some of the things that I felt were issues and spoke up for some people that I felt like were being mistreated, not necessarily in the decisions that were made. This was the interesting thing for me, to agree with some of the decisions, but I didn't agree with how they were being carried out.
Yes.
I found myself being marginalized over the course of about 6 months. And the crazy part is the marginalization happened after I got another promotion.
Oh, wow.
I got promoted to a chief officer position, chief communications officer. And that's when the marginalization began to happen. It was the craziest thing. And it was also when I lost a significant amount of autonomy. And it became very clear that I was no longer wanted in the organization. And so, and I think, and this is how organizations like this work, I think that the reason why I got the promotion, although I felt like I deserved the promotion and had done the work to get there, and I was also the top communications person. It's not like there was somebody above me.
Right.
I think that another individual that they liked and planned on promoting they felt, and this is how decisions, I saw these things get handled like this all the time. They knew, oh, well, we can't give this person a promotion without also giving Philip a promotion. And
Right.
so they were like, well, we'll worry about the rest of the, stuff that's dealing with Philip after that. And so I ended up being marginalized and bullied. And then I started my agency. And so I'll stop right there just to kind of let you interject in case you have any questions.
Yeah, I was actually thinking about what a strategic move it was to promote you. Was that position already created, or that was a new position that they made for you to be chief marketing officer?
So the position had existed before me,
Okay,
but it had not existed during my time and tenure there.
understood. Yeah,
Yeah.
what a strategy, and it's always so fascinating for me to see how companies make those moves.
Yeah.
It's also heart-wrenching to know why you're doing it instead of just being
Yeah.
honest and upfront. But
Yeah.
that's interesting, very interesting. So you
Yeah.
started your own marketing agency while you were the chief marketing officer, knowing
Yeah.
that
So
it was getting bad.
So I actually started it a year after I took the job when things were actually good
Oh, okay, good.
because I knew that I would need some type of exit strategy. I did not know exactly um, how that would pan out, and how it manifested itself was completely different than what I originally envisioned, right? What I was prepping for. But at the end of the day, it still worked. So it was 2018 when I filed for my LLC. And even as I was transitioning out, when I knew, okay, I'm going to have to tap into this resource that I've been kind of slowly building over time, I didn't have any money saved up because I minimized my involvement and kind of kept it at a strategic level by hiring people. And
Sure.
so all the money that was coming in was going right back out and paying salaries. I'll get a few $100s a month, and that's about it. Even though the revenue was just a little bit higher than that, it was probably about by the time I left and had to depend on it completely and was just working with kind of me and my actually assistant now, um, I could probably I could cover my salary
Wow.
that without insurance or anything. So it was just basically take home. So about $4,000 or $5,000 a month.
What a blessing.
Um, yeah, it was a huge blessing. But here's the thing, like none of those, I want to be very clear with about the risk that was there because there was some risk, right?
Yeah.
It wasn't just, I don't want to exaggerate how bad it was, but the reality is that none of those clients were on like 12-month long-term
Containers.
contracts.
Right.
All of them were month to month. So at any given moment, they could have decided that they were done. Also, a lot of the work that needed to be done was basically on me to do it. And I'm not, a person who I'm a visionary and strategist, problem solver. But when it comes to like the execution and the recurring tasks and the person who's just kind of like my hard work looks very different than other people's hard work. I'll say that. And so, but I knew that I was going to have to do that for a period of time. But, just by God's grace, I was able to grow that over the next 6 months, grow my team at least, and bring on some new retainers that kind of carried us for a little while. And as during this transition, the crazy part was that as I was exiting a toxic environment, I realized that through the stress and the challenges of entrepreneurship, it was exposing the dysfunction and toxicity that was within me.
Yeah.
Right. So I was talking to a group of people the other day and I was just like, man, it's really easy. It's a lot easier to grow a department because you're shielded by so many things, right? You're not thinking about the budget for the company. You're not thinking about how the money's coming in. Your job is just to do your job well. When you're an entrepreneur, you have to think about everything from the vision of the company to revenue to uh, making sure projects are executed. Especially in the early stages, you're operating on every single level of the company. And I found out the type of leader I truly was. I knew how to market, right? But I did not know how to lead people. I did not know how to motivate people. I did not know how to create an environment where people worked well together under those types of pressures, and it was exposed during that time.
Yeah, I would say becoming an entrepreneur definitely leaves you naked, where you're
Yes.
just looking at yourself and naked and alone, really, because it is all up to you, and it's up to you to be resourceful and find your gaps and then close them, so I could
Yeah.
not agree more as I see
Yeah.
myself. What are some signs that somebody listening could know that they are in a toxic environment at work?
That's a great question. There's so many signs of toxicity that you can look for, but I would say so. There's three levels of health, right? There's toxicity, right? That's the worst that it gets.
Right.
There's dysfunction, and I think this is where most organizations sit. And
Yeah,
then there's health, right? And I think that ultimately, when you're in dysfunction, you're either moving towards toxicity or you're moving towards health.
that's
You're
good.
never really just stagnant there. And you want to be an organization that is moving towards health, right? Um, and so when it comes to signs of toxicity, I think it's an environment where power and force is used to motivate people. Power, force, and money, right? If you have a situation where people are using their power to get people to do what they want you to do. They're using things like threats and bullying. If conversations aren't had directly about performance issues or problems, however, repercussions come swiftly, right? Without you even knowing that you did anything wrong and not having clarity about like what's going on. And so
Right.
usually in dysfunctional cultures, you may get sort of that passive aggressive indirect, but it takes them years to fire you, right?
Right.
Or to say something. In toxic cultures, they set you up for failure,
Yeah.
right? There's an intentionality that if they don't want you there for whatever reason, instead of trying to help you grow, they're just going to try to get rid of you.
Right.
And
Almost like
that's what
safety.
toxicity.
Yeah.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, they set you up for failure, and that's one of the things that I was experiencing during my time is that I was being set up for failure.
Right.
All of my autonomy, and not just autonomy, but responsibilities, were taken. I was giving assignments without any clear directives,
Right.
and I didn't really know how to handle them. And so, when you're in a situation like that, it's very easy for us to have a very emotional reaction to something like that, which
Sure.
is what I did. And it always sets you up for failure.
Right. And there's a clear distinction in like work being uh taken away from you or given to another department and delegation, right? Because I feel like a lot of people
Yes.
get those
Yes.
two confused. And anytime you tell someone to delegate, they think you're taking their job security away from them. Could you
That's so good. Yeah.
elaborate on what the clear distinctions are and why people shouldn't be afraid to delegate?
Yeah. So I I have seen individuals not ask for help,
You're right.
not um be willing to give access or give passwords to individuals within other departments simply because they knew that as long as they were the only ones who knew how to manage and maintain that system, they felt like they had job security. It was leverage for them, right?
Right.
And as a result of them kind of hoarding, right, that access, they it essentially led to a lot of inefficiencies
Hmm.
and strategic limitations that could have been removed with some collaboration or some delegation.
Yep.
And so the difference between delegation and somebody taking responsibilities away from you is delegation is, hey, I need help. And you helping and taking this on will allow me to be more effective and efficient in these areas, where I really have gifts and can thrive and grow. And and the other one just looks like, hey, we're taking all of this stuff away. We're not even telling you about it. We're just going to give it to somebody else, and we're not going to give you an explanation, and it's not going to be a conversation. And so what's at the root of both of those two scenarios is that when you delegate, it shows that you trust. Right. Because you have to be vulnerable. It takes vulnerability to say, hey, I need help.
Right.
Right. And when you see people not wanting to delegate, that means that they're suspicious. Right. And suspicion and vulnerability cannot coexist. Right. And so I would see that all the time. And so I think that the way that you can tell whether or not something is being taken away from you in order to reduce your responsibilities is essentially if you can have a conversation about it, right? If you can ask, hey, help me understand why this was happening. Usually you will be consulted. Questions would have been asked of you, like, hey, so help me understand how this works. Right. What would be some challenges if we took this off your plate and gave it to someone else? How would this help you do your job more effectively? Right. That's kind of like them managing and kind of like teaching you delegations, because there are some team members that kind of want to hold on to things, but it's not because they're suspicious or afraid. It's just because they have a hard time asking for help. Right. And so if you're in a situation like that as a manager, you lead with questions, not with actions, right?
Right. Like force.
Not with force. You lead with questions and curiosity to make sure that the decision that you're making is the best for that person and ultimately the entire company.
Yeah. And making that person feel safe in those questions is something that I found to be extremely important, especially when someone is suspicious. And it's okay that they're suspicious. They probably came from an environment where they needed to be, but I can't give you more if you keep if your plate is full. So that's really good. I really like your advice there and the distinctions between the two. Most of your channel is talking about how people can identify what a toxic environment is and then how to start the process of leaving it. So for my viewers or listeners, could you explain how somebody can what we just talked about identifying and then now start the process of leaving or making it a better work environment?
Yeah. So it's always helpful for us to start with the environment. And that's just naturally what we do. We want to assess where the toxicity begins and ends. Right. Am I a part of the problem? How long has the problem been happening? Is it now that I'm concerned about it just because it's happening directly to me, or have I made excuses for it, watched it with passivity as it has happened to others? And so once you do an assessment of externally what's going on, like what are you calling toxic, right? Because sometimes you can go into a healthy environment and feel like it's toxic just because they are doing some things that in your dysfunction and toxicity you never actually like experienced and you never even thought was possible, and so you assume motives, right? Behind. And one of the most self-sabotaging things that a toxic person can do is not ask questions, right? And good questions, right? Hey, so what led to that decision? And because if in a healthy companies encourage curiosity.
Yep.
Right. They want you to ask those questions. Why? Because they have good reasons for everything that they do. Yep. They're not just walking around making decisions, especially personnel decisions or people decisions willy-nilly. They are very intentional about every move and step that they make. And so they're happy for you to ask those questions. Whereas toxic and dysfunctional companies are not. It's none of your business. They're not transparent, right? And so once you assess the situation, and you determine whether or not the company is toxic. And let's just say you do. Then you got to look at yourself, and you got to ask, okay, how have I contributed to this?
Mhm.
Um, and what can I learn from this process? Right? How have I maybe not even contributed to the toxicity, but exasperated the response that I have received? Right? And so, because a lot of times when we're in toxic situations, we think that all that matters is that we were right.
Yeah.
Most of the people who are in the comment sections who book calls with me are very, very justice oriented people, and I love that about them. Right, because that's you got to have your values. That's
Yeah.
so important. You
Yeah.
got to know what you believe in and what you're going to stand for. But the reality is that having good values is great, but it's not enough. Right, you got to have some awareness of yourself, how you communicate those values, and how those values manifest themselves, right, as you're relating to other people.
Right.
And so going around making accusations and telling people that they're wrong and telling people that this is not right, and leading with judgment rather than curiosity is how you exasperate problems.
Yep.
And so I tell people when on client calls, I tell people all the time, you don't want to be an activist. You want to be an investigator. Right? Activists, they're going, why are we doing this? And why we're doing that? And this is not right. And these people need to be held accountable. Investigators, they're both seeking justice, right? But the investigator goes through questions. Think about Columbo, right? Columbo would walk in and he was unassuming, kind of, messy with the way that he carried himself. He always seemed like he was the dumbest person in the room, even though he was a brilliant detective. And he would go in and just ask these questions. And he would just have a conversation with people. And he'd make them feel comfortable. He was totally okay with them feeling superior to him.
Yep.
And then every Columbo episode, I used to watch these all the time with my mom.
Me
Every
too.
Columbo episode, he would always forget something, and he would go back to the door. And he'd say, "Hey, one more thing," and he'll ask them that last question. And usually, that last question, they would be honest because they're like, "This guy's an idiot.
Yeah.
He had the guards down."
Yep.
That curiosity is so key, making people feel okay,
Yeah.
making people feel comfortable, doing everything that you can not to undermine individuals, but to respect the position and the authority that they have, regardless of whether or not you're right.
Yes.
That takes a person who doesn't have an ego. And a lot of people, even though they're right, they also have egos that come along with that. And it makes situations worse. So once you've done some self-reflection, that self-reflection is super important because here's the thing. If you don't self-reflect, you will self-sabotage when you go into a better work environment.
Yeah.
And you will have some hard lessons to learn. And it's going to be, um, it's going to be, it's going to mess with you a bit, right? Because you go from one situation where you are like the healthiest person, or at least the person who wants to do what's right. And then you go into another situation with people, well, everybody here wants to do what's right.
Right.
But you're the only one that doesn't know how to pursue that righteousness and that justice in a way that respects other people.
Right.
And that is what oftentimes hurts individuals when they can't make that transition.
Mm. That's really good. That's really, really good. The investigator part, as a seeker myself, I can see that. I tell people, like, playing dumb is the smartest thing you can ever do because it does two things. One, you're
That's
unassuming,
good. Yeah.
And then two, if you uncover something that you didn't know and you went in with just trying to understand, right? Now you understand. And I think that
Yeah.
that's really good. If you're in a toxic environment, one, you don't have to conform to the toxicity.
Yes.
I agree with you 100% about not being an advocate too, because you're almost just perpetuating the issue
Yeah.
because everybody's just digging their heels in. But instead trying to understand why they're toxic and why they think the way they think. And you can only make the change from the inside. So I love all that advice. I think that's super helpful. So we talked about some strategies of self-management. How do people, I think that in my experience, people have sometimes a hard time making decisions based on the fear around the decision or the failure. These are my perceptions of why. What are your perceptions of why people have a hard time making a decision?
I think you're right. I think fear of failure, comfort. There's so many different things. Comfort with where they are, right? Um, they feel comfortable with the job role that they have. They feel comfortable with the money that they're making. Um, they don't really know what it is that they're good at,
Right.
right? So one of the things that's always interesting to me is when individuals, um, it's fascinating, and I don't say this in a judgmental way, because I really want to understand like their their thinking on it, but it's always fascinating when individuals are extremely judgmental of business owners, um, but lack the willingness to take risks
Mhm.
and build something,
Yeah.
or take a risk and go somewhere. Because in my mind, if you know that you're competent in your role, right, that you're a top performer, then you know that regardless of what the news is saying about the job market, there's somebody out there that can use you. People are still trying to build businesses and make money. They
100%.
still are looking for competent people.
Yep.
Um, regardless of um, how simple we think it is to build a business, or how much I think we sometimes minimize the risk that entrepreneurs take in order to build businesses and companies that employ other people. They're not willing to take those risks
Right.
just to find another job,
Right.
right? And so risk is not that big of a deal when somebody else does it and finds success, because usually you don't see how many times they fail before they actually experience that success. But all of a sudden now risk is a really big deal
Yep.
when you have to do it, to take that leap and to do that next thing in order to bet on yourself.
Right.
And so I think this shows up in interviews. This shows up in negotiating salaries. That fear that you have is what I mean. That's what's showing up, right? If
Yeah.
you don't think, if you don't believe enough in yourself to know that you can go somewhere else and find a job, um, and that will value you, then you really probably don't believe in yourself. And so, if you don't believe in yourself, how can you expect the employer to believe in you and to believe that you're worth the salary that you're asking for,
Right.
right? Or the raise, right, that you're asking for, right? Because you don't want to leave. And so, I think I think sometimes that comfort and that lack of belief in ourselves, and sometimes that lack of belief is real, right? It's warranted, because here's what I found. I found that a lot of people only know, right, how to do their job. And they know deep down that they don't, that their skills or what they do at that particular job isn't really transferable.
Mm.
And so what usually happens is that turns into arrogance, because they have to, in order to leave, they have to pump themselves up and believe, hey, I can do something that they know they really, or posturing, right? Maybe
Right.
posturing is probably a better word here. It turns into posturing, right? I have to pretend like I can do something in order to get the opportunity, and then find out I can't do it. But at that point, they're stuck with me, right? Or, whatever. And so, I think oftentimes that we know deep down that we lack something, and that's okay. right? I think it's best to admit that out loud to yourself and go and do the things that you have to do that are needed to develop yourself as a professional that can offer value to any company that you join.
Yeah, that's amazing. I think that that's really, really sound advice. Um, as I went through that too early on in my career, and it took me years to actually know what I was good at. So,
Yeah.
how can or what resources, what assessments, or how can people start identifying what their natural abilities are so that they can start believing them so that when they go to the table, they can ask for what they deserve?
Yeah. I think that number one, you start with figuring out what your natural abilities are. And this is very different than skills,
Okay.
right? Um, Skills are things that are developed, cultivated over time. Natural abilities, these are the things that you were just born with. This is the type of work that you do without people asking you to do it.
Mm,
And so Patrick Lencioni developed a new framework assessment called the Six Types of Working Genius, and I'm a certified facilitator. I love it. I'm a huge believer in it.
I
Believer in
want
it.
to know more.
It is a game changer, and the more companies, businesses, organizations begin to tap into this, it will significantly enhance their ability to lead and develop and utilize their employees. But for individual professionals, it gives you the words and the understanding that when somebody asks you, hey, what are your strengths and weaknesses? You will be able to answer that question with confidence like a boss,
Mm,
right? And so for me, my um, geniuses, natural abilities are wonder and invention. So I know that if I'm going into a job that is going to let me find problems, come up with solutions, I know without a doubt that I'm going to enjoy that job, right? I don't care, and it can be in the industry, right? Um, as long as I get to ask questions, as long as I get to be the investigator that I have learned that I need to be in order to do my job well, I will love that job.
right.
I also know that if I am put into a marketing position, let's just say it's marketing, and somebody's asking me, hey, you're going to be managing the social media posts every week. You're going to be, a lot of tenacity stuff, right? We're going to bring projects to you, and your job is just purely implementation. I know that I will be miserable in that job.
Sure.
So I can look at a job description and say, this ain't for me.
Mm,
They want basically a marketer who can do um, ideation, activation, and implementation. Right. I'm a purely ideation marketer. Right. And so I know that. And so I can go into a job interview and know what the types of questions I need to ask. Hey, how much would I involved in implementation? Does this mean that I'm going to have recurring tasks? Because I can do some, right?
sure.
Nobody gets away from
Sure.
task oriented work completely, but I can kind of figure out whether or not it is going to be a job where I get to work more in my areas of genius or less. And here's the beautiful part about geniuses. The way you identify your geniuses, apart from the assessment, the way you assess, I guess, the assessment results is the things that they describe as your genius. So for me, that's wonder and invention. These should be things that you get joy and fulfillment
Right.
from when you're doing them. They should be the thing when somebody asks you for help, you automatically go in operating in your geniuses,
Hmm.
right? And so asking me for help, don't ask me for help if you already know what you're going to do, you already decided on what the problem is, and you're just looking for some people to execute. I'm not your person, right?
Right.
But if you're coming in, you're like, hey, we're not even sure what the problem is,
Right.
right? And we think we kind of know what the problem is, but we know something needs to change. That's me. I'm like, that's my wheelhouse.
Yeah.
Let's go. You called the right person. And so, um, but there are other people on my team who, you don't know what your problem is, call me when you do. You ain't got a solution, don't text me until you figured out what y'all want to do.
Yeah,
And I love those people, right? And I can work with those people, and those people compliment me, and I know I need those types of people on my team. And so, yeah, that's six types of working genius in a nutshell, a very, very general overview. But knowing your natural abilities, start there, and that will give you some confidence because you'll be able to realize that, oh, I have more to offer than I realize. I actually have something that I've always had, and now I just need to cultivate that, right? I need to hone that.
for sure.
I need to lean more into that, not get better at implementation. I'm not trying to get better at implementation,
Right,
right? There are other things I need to get better at, but it's not a natural ability that I just don't have.
right.
It's I need to get better at leadership. I need to get better at asking good questions. Those are the things that I need to. Those are the areas that I need to improve in.
Yeah, I like that a lot. And I love assessments. And assessments, I think, are some of the most helpful tools because they allow you to know more about yourself and accept those areas of geniuses, accept your strengths, accept your weaknesses. And like you just said, hire people that compliment you.
Yeah,
Hire people that compliment you is one of the most intelligent things a leader, owner of a company that can do because you don't want to hire more people like you want to hire people
no,
that are smarter than you in other areas that can
yeah.
help. So that's
And
huge.
isn't that always the people we're attracted to, right? The people who kind of think like us and who kind of can brainstorm with us. And I'm like, if I hired people, as soon as it was time to actually do something, we all be looking at each other. It's like it would be a disaster. So yeah,
100%. Very good. So what is the most challenging part of running? I don't know if you guys are all remote, but running a remote business, and how do you address it?
yeah. So we're mostly remote,
Okay.
and it's challenging. Probably the hardest part is communication. We really have to work at that. And over time, we've become really, really good at that.
Good.
I think we have a very high functioning remote team. Now, with that being said, I don't know if I will ever make another hire that was not local. And so, and the only reason I say that is because our company culture is so, um, we're so focused on health
Yeah.
more than anything else is that in order for a person to really embrace our culture, you kind of need to basically do 6 months to a year in the
Immersion.
office with me,
Right.
right? And it may not even take that long, but I haven't decided how long it takes. But I know that with the level of intentionality, conversations, the immersion that needs to happen, I can't do that remotely.
Yeah.
I can. It's worked really well with two of my hires. One is in California, the other one is Colorado, and mainly because these are people that I knew. Um, um, I knew I went to college with one, and the other one actually I didn't know her, but she went through the whole growth process with me, right? And stayed and kind of embraced the values alongside me.
Amazing.
And so that humble, hungry, and smart, the ideal team player, Patrick Lencioni again. Uh, that's what we're all about. And so if a person comes in and they struggle in those areas, and not in like you know. There's versions of humility or understandings of humility that are out there,
Right.
but if you come and work for us, you're going to be really tested on how humble you actually are and how much you're willing to grow in those areas. And the thing is that everybody on our team, we know that you can grow because we've all watched ourselves grow,
Right.
right, in those areas because we were like, everybody else who, if you got called out on a mistake, you were tempted to like hide it or cover it
Right.
up or make excuses for it, right?
Yeah.
And so now our culture is one that when you make a mistake and you're called out in front of the team, not in a shaming way, but just in a, hey, we're just trying to solve the problem. It's not personal.
Yeah.
We're just trying to figure out what happened so that we can fix it. Um, you embrace it.
Yeah.
You sit there in it and it's like, yeah, let's talk about it. Because I want to learn from this as well, and I want to help my other team members learn from this because it's not about me; it's about the collective goal that we're all trying to accomplish, and that is that's a beautiful thing. And so one of the areas that we're really focusing on right now is like asking good questions,
Mm.
right? Curiosity. I think I've known what curiosity. I value curiosity because I grew up in very judgmental contexts, but um, I never really knew how to live it, right? How
Right.
to live and be a curious person, and just in the last like 2 to 3 months, I've been reading and applying new things that I've been learning, and now I'm sharing that with my team, and we're all trying to really grow in asking really good questions and leading with questions rather than assumptions. And I think that it's just going to take our our performance to the next level as we continue to grow in that.
For sure, for sure. So you talked about communication being something that you guys are a lot better at. What does that look like? What is, I don't know if it's like in your day to day. Do you guys start with communication in the morning?
Mhm.
Um, and what does that communication look like? Do you have regular team meetings? If so, how often? Like, just give me like a high level of
Oh
like,
yeah.
how does it work in communication?
So we do a daily stand up. It's not daily anymore. We do stand up 3 times a week in the
Right.
morning, 9 a.m. Right. We go over what are our priorities for the day, what are the things we got questions about. If we have things in our project management system, we use Basecamp that we're unsure about. We ask, hey, I see this. I have no idea what this is or what this means. Can you give me some context? And we yeah, and then we essentially just kind of go over everybody's tasks for that week. So that's our almost daily meeting, and then we have a weekly meeting. That's our project management meeting.
Mhm.
This is when we're kind of talking about projects that are already started,
Okay.
right? And this is our galvanizing and support meeting. And so at the beginning of this meeting, we jokingly call it a love fest, where we go around and tell every person in the room, every person on the call, which is our entire staff, goes around and tells every other person in the call something that they did this week that was awesome, that was helpful.
Mm.
And one of the reasons that we did this is because I'm not naturally a um, a complimenter, right?
Okay.
If you get if it used to be where if you got a compliment from me, like you knocked something out of the park, it was absolutely amazing. And but I learned that in leadership, that's just not enough, right?
Yes.
You need to regularly tell your team, even when they do the small things well, because the small things and the simple things are really important. And it was because, again, this one week we had been particularly critical, but not anything like that was like shaming or bad. I was just hearing mostly criticisms that week. I hadn't
Right.
heard anything encouraging. And so she just, on the call was like, hey, it's really hard to hear what I'm doing wrong, which I take responsibility for that and I need to learn from that, but I'm never really hearing what I'm doing right.
That's
And I was like, thankfully I had enough self-awareness to know, yep, that sounds about like me, right? Yep, that's that's how most people experience me. I am so sorry. We're going to fix that. And so instead of me just saying, hey guys, like we're going to, I'm gonna really try to do better at that in the future. Like I put a plan together and I was like, all right, at the beginning of our weekly meetings, we're going to go around and we're going to tell each other, right, some things that they did well that week. And it was a morale boost like I've never seen. It was a
so good.
complete game changer for our culture, for the people for the person who needed it, as well as for the people who didn't know they needed it. Right? It was hugely beneficial, even for me personally. And so I thanked her and celebrated her, and we still talk about, hey, like we do this because of you. Like we celebrate her for being vulnerable and admitting, hey, it's hard,
Yeah.
right? I'm not trying to make excuses for any mistakes I made, but I never really hear about anything that I do well. And so that's our project management meeting. The other two, we do an ideation meeting weekly, and that's because we still have some marketing clients.
Right.
And so we still do ideation a little bit more often than we would if we were just primarily focused on coaching at this point. And there's one other meeting that I feel like I'm forgetting. Daily. Oh, and then we'll try to do once a month, once a quarter. It's not really an offsite. I don't know what you call it, but where we get together for a day and we don't really talk about anything business. We just talk about really our values and our culture. So we might, if there's a book that we're reading that could be really helpful or important, we'll go through that book together. And so right now we're still slowly working through the 5 dysfunctions of a team.
Great book.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's awesome, dude. Like, I think my mind was racing when you said that, because I can already see how that can work clearly in leadership, but also in just relationship.
It does. It helps.
I mean, my God, like, that's a game changer. I am definitely stealing, adopting all that, because that's
You should. I stole it.
Yeah.
I stole it and adopted it. If you want the framework, again, I've read everything that this guy has written twice. Death by Meetings by Patrick Lencioni. Probably more than that, to be honest. I go back and I study him. I just kind of got out of the place where like he's the only one I'm reading for like a year and a half. I was only reading his stuff, and so now I begin to read some other individuals who've been extremely helpful for me. But my foundation, all of that, I'll tell anybody, Patrick Lencioni.
Yeah, let's talk about that. The book, The Motive.
Yeah, that's where it all started.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What is the book about? And I already want to read it, but what is the book about and how did it change your mindset?
It's about leaders abdicating their responsibilities. So if you've never read anything by Patrick Lencioni, you should know that all of his books, with the exception of one, The Advantage, are fables.
Yeah.
With methodologies and frameworks at the end. And so if you don't really like stuffy business books, but you want to grow as a business leader and as a professional, read his books. You will enjoy his books.
Yeah.
Excuse me. The stories are, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I agree. Patrick Lencioni is amazing.
Yeah. The stories are really good, actually. I love them. Yeah. Other people that I've recommended them to, and I was like, well, whatever. Like, I think I love them because like I can envision like everything that is, I feel like I'm getting like real life scenarios constantly. And I can relate so much to the experiences of the characters. And sometimes it's just different characters that I can relate to. But this particular book is about how leaders abdicate their responsibilities to mentor, to develop a cohesive leadership team, and so on and so forth. And I think he has about 5. One of the things that he talks about is the 2 motives for leadership. Mm-hmm. There is reward centered. There's a reward centered motivation for leadership. So they want to be in leadership because of the rewards essentially that come with leadership, like pay, accolades, status, right? Those are the reasons that I worked hard. So this is a reward for my hard work, right? And then you have, he calls it reward centered, and there's a second one, and it's escaping me right now, but it's more based on, he doesn't call it servant based, responsibility center. I knew it was another R. Responsibility centered leadership, and these are the individuals who are motivated to go into leadership because they know and care about the responsibilities, right? They know the importance of and care about the responsibilities that are entrusted to a leader, and so they want to do those hard things. Yeah. And so many people go in for the rewards, but they abdicate the responsibilities.
100%. Just had this conversation last night with somebody who's looking for a promotion. And I said, it's all about what you're going in there for. And if it's about you, you're not going to be successful. But if it's about them, you will never have to worry. Because, a lot of frontline employees worry about getting the promotion because leaders get knocked off first. And I'm like, you have nothing to worry about as long as your intention are for the right reasons,
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
the leaders that get knocked off, it's likely because their intentions were not on the
Yeah.
right reasons. So I
Yeah.
love that. Definitely going to pick up The Motive. I haven't read it yet, but I do love Patrick and his books. I think The Five Dysfunctions of a Team was like one of the first leadership books I ever picked up. Uh,
Yeah. Don't
10
you just love Catherine?
Yeah.
Like, I'm just like, man, I wish there was a person in real life so I could hang out with her and learn from her.
Yeah.
Boss.
Yeah.
Yeah.
100%. Yeah. So tell me, what is like your vision and what's the future of the highest good consulting and coaching?
Yeah, that's a great question. Like, we want to make leadership development. I know, a lot of my content is targeted towards professionals. And I want to help those individuals become better leaders. I think leadership, this whole to democratize leadership development, we
Yeah.
kind of stole that to democratize from Southwest Airlines. Southwest Airlines is to democratize air travel, and they do that by making it more accessible, right, to common people. So they don't do the first class, they don't do seat assignments and all that. And I'm like, leadership development needs to be democratized because very few people get access to it. They
Yeah.
only develop, when you think about like most companies and they do leadership development, who do they take on those trips? People who are already leaders. Who do they let go to those workshops? People who are already in leadership. It's at that point, I won't say it's too late, but it's way past due to be investing and developing that person. I want every person in my company to be developed as a leader. If somebody works for me and goes somewhere else and is not immediately ready to thrive in a leadership role, I haven't done my job. I haven't done my job. And so when people ask, like, who are your clients? And I was like, well, my first clients are my employees. If I'm not coaching and mentoring them, then I'm not doing my job. And so I really want to do whatever I can to make it more accessible and to set individuals up who have experience. And I think the people who are more likely to take that risk and grow in that area are the people who have experienced toxicity and
Yeah.
they know how bad it is and know how many good leaders are needed.
Mm,
And I'm saying, hey, will you step up? Because if you're willing to step up, you can't complain about a toxic leader if you're not willing to step up to be the leader that is needed.
yeah.
Because guess what? That toxic leader was somebody else's employee before you, and they were probably complaining about their boss,
Yep.
and they never did the work to get healthy and get to a place. And so now they're somebody's toxic boss. If you ever get promoted, if you don't actually be intentional about learning how to lead, leadership is a competency, right? It's a
Yes.
competency. It is not something that just happens.
Yes.
You don't become a good leader by experience.
Yes.
You do not become a good leader by experience. I one of the things that I've come to believe, and I would love to hear your thoughts on this, is I don't believe a person knows how to do something if they lack a framework or a methodology or a process.
I
One of the easiest ways, ask them, hey, so if somebody tells you they know how to do something, what's your methodology? What's your process?
mm.
Yeah, go ahead. You were about to say something.
No, I was just gonna add to that. Like I tell people all the time, like, just because you're in a leadership role doesn't make you a leader. I know that's what we say, but you're more of a manager. Leaders study leadership. And if you're not, I literally have like a social media video queued up saying, if you're not studying leadership, then don't consider yourself a leader. Because if you don't know
Yeah,
your framework, if you don't know yourself as a leader, if you don't have a vision of what you want your culture to feel like, be like, do like, whatever, then you're just maintaining what the last person left, whatever
yeah,
that is, right?
yeah.
And that is not intentional. That is not, leaders are intentional. Leaders know the direction they want to go in, and they may not know how to get there, but they're going to use the team, they're going to leverage to get there together. But
Mhm.
they know what they want. They know at least what they want it to feel like when they walk in. And I don't think enough leaders know that it is exactly what you said, which I've never heard of before, which is it's a competency. It's
Yeah.
not You're not born it, you're made, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. I was talking to um, one of my newer employees, and he had kind of really been struggling with productivity. And productivity, again, for us is not something that's super, super important for a new employee, right? We're more so focused on their behavior, but we want them to be as productive as they can be reasonably,
Sure.
right? And I said, hey, I was like, I said, do you know how to be productive? He's like, yeah, with confidence. And I was like, huh? I was like, what's your process? Uh, Man, he just kind of, and eventually I saved him, and I was like, if you don't have a process for being productive,
Yeah.
you don't know how to be productive. Now,
100.
had this individual been productive before in their lives? Of course they had,
Right.
right? Had I had some good leadership experiences, right, when I was in my previous role? Of course I did. But I have a process. I have a framework. As a marketer, though, I had processes. I had frameworks. I knew how to build an engine that would get me leads, that would convert those leads into customers or donors or whatever. But when it comes to leadership, I was just I was showing up being the best person I could be. And
Right.
sometimes unproductive people are showing up working as hard as they can, but they don't really know how to work hard.
Right.
And so I gave them a simple methodology that I had used and that had some success with. It's called the 333 framework. You probably heard of it or seen it around on LinkedIn. It's like 3 hours of your deep work, the things that maybe even you've been procrastinating. These are bigger projects. 3 tasks that you need to get done that only take about 30 minutes, and then 3 maintenance things that you need to check in on. And essentially, he had his next 2 days were more productive than his first 4 or 5 weeks of work, because it's you got to have a process. You got to know how you were successful,
Yep.
not just that you've been successful before, because there are a lot of things that we discount that are attributed to our success, and you need to pay attention to how you were successful, not just lean on the fact that you have been successful.
Right. I don't think enough people reflect on how they were successful to build their own framework and say, well, this worked for me. Let me see what it is I did.
Yeah,
Um, and to replicate that, it's just happenstance, right? It's just, oh shit, I was good at this. And then
yeah,
I'll be good at this next thing too. But if you don't know how you did it, then you won't know how to do it again.
yep,
And I love the 333. I had never heard of it before, but
okay,
I love block scheduling. It works for me.
yeah,
It's something that I thrive off of. So I'm definitely going to try that. I think that that's going to be helpful
yeah,
for
yeah.
myself. So last two questions. One, how do people find you? And then the other one is, what books, resources, or tools do you recommend for the aspiring leader and professional?
Yes. So you can find me on Instagram primarily. I'm dabbling in over at LinkedIn a little bit,
Okay.
getting my feet wet there. Um, yeah, but primarily I'm posting almost every day on Instagram. That's where I'm active, and I'm also dabbling in on Threads as well. That's
Okay.
been interesting as that platform is kind of growing. Because in the early days I spent a lot of time on Twitter, so Threads feels like I'm back home a little bit,
Yeah.
but a little uncomfortable, and so yeah, so Instagram and Threads. When it comes to recommendations, I recommend reading, but also reading and applying. One of
Yes.
the things that I wish I had when I transitioned was a coach and mentor, um, and I didn't have that. And I think a lot of my growth probably took longer than it needed
Mm,
to, because I was going at so much along. But again, by God's grace, I was able to get where I am now.
yeah.
Um, and really, because so much of that was collaborative with my team, getting feedback from my team. I don't look at my team as like, my employees or my staff, right? There's not this separation between the leader and the team. I'm a part of the team,
Yeah.
right? And I have a particular role on the team. And so um, they having them to kind of walk alongside me and help me grow and give me feedback was super, super helpful. But it would have been really great to have a mentor
Yeah.
or coach somebody who could help me practice some of those things that I was learning. Because sometimes I know a lot of people who read a lot of books, and so I'm always careful to say, well, I've read, everything Patrick has wrote, because I know a lot of people who also have read maybe everything that he's written, but haven't actually applied it.
Right.
They just know it, and it it takes some risk to actually apply what it is that you're reading. And so it's better to read a few books and apply them than to read a bunch of books just to say, hey, I read, you know, 50 books a year, but you haven't applied any of what you've learned.
Right.
And so everything that Patrick Lencioni has written, and podcasts related to those. But the most important thing is finding somebody who you can work with, who can help you reflect and apply what it is that you're learning.
Yeah. I think
It's,
implementation, self-reflection and implementation are the two highest things on my, need to do list for people is just self-reflect and then implement. And don't be afraid, like you said, to implement. It is going to be scary, but be curious to know if what you read is going to work. And if it doesn't,
yeah,
what's the next one, right? And
yeah,
something will stick, right? And then you can adopt that and make it your own and figure out what your flavor to it would be. But I like that. I think implementation is that's really what knowledge is. Just to know something is not enough. Implementation is absolutely necessary. So thank you for that. Thank you for
yeah.
all the gold you dropped today, and I appreciate your time. I appreciate you doing this a second time. I feel like this one was different. I like it. I like it a lot.
Good,
Yeah.
good. Hopefully it got better. I strive to do that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Me too.
yeah,
Me too. 100%. So that wraps up our episode of Leadership from the Heart. Thank you again to all you listeners. I hope you hit subscribe and share this episode with anyone. All of Philip's links will be in the show notes. So if you want to check him out, I highly encourage you to do so. He's got great content on
thank you.
Instagram, and hopefully we'll see him soon on LinkedIn. We'll see you next time on Leadership from the Heart.
Thank you.
No, thank you, dude. That was good.